What is going on, Wolfpack Nation? Hope that everybody's doing well and having a great weekend so far. So I wanted to kind of throw together a quick video just to kind of give our followers and supporters and Wolfpack Nation some information in terms of what's going on, talk about some of the numbers. And at the end, too, I wanted to kind of give a prediction of who I maybe suspect the ACC to go after and hopefully land as the two expansion teams to get to that 16-team mark with the SEC. So to first start off, the biggest thing which I do have to say the ACC has to do during this point is they have to bring in big names, at least one big name to add to the list of the ACC teams that we currently have out of the 14. And this kind of, I'll go ahead and say it right now, kind of immediately kind of, for me, draws out the names like UCF and Cincinnati that a lot of teams are talking about, a lot of people are talking about right now. But to me, they're still at the beginning stages of their programs in terms of growing it. UCF is a name that has been doing a lot in the college football world, especially like, for example, with claiming themselves as national champions a couple years ago and going on the undefeated season. But again, I just don't see it being as a huge name that a lot of people would be looking at their TV guide, would be scrolling down, see UCF and go, hey, I want to watch that football game. I just don't really see that. And then Cincinnati, I mean, they had an absolute breakout year in 2020, but again, still in the beginning stages and growing. And I do wonder as well that, if there ever is the chance where the Cincinnati head coach leaves, where does it kind of leave it? So that's just kind of my question with it. So one thing that's definitely obvious, though, that is unfortunately a big problem, though, for the ACC really comes down to the ACC network. And the reasons why I kind of say that, first of all, is that so the contract they have in place with the ACC network is in place through 2036. So it is going to be in place for a long time. And it also, too, first of all, has been made very clear by a lot of even NC State fans, but ACC fans in general, that they haven't been very thrilled with what the ACC network has been offering. Obviously, the idea first, and when the ACC network was first announced, was very exciting because you look at teams like Texas, the SEC, they have their own networks, and so for us to compete, we said, well, we're going to create our own, but definitely have seen a lot of issues with it, but even too from the revenue side, unfortunately, it just hasn't been able to draw the same revenue that a lot of these other conferences are making. So here's to kind of give you some numbers. So back in 2019, didn't really look at 2020 because obviously 2020 was a weird year to say the least. So I wanted to kind of use a normal year. So back in 2019, the revenue numbers. So the Big Ten had the most revenue at $780 million. The SEC was second with $721 million. Then it's a big jump down to the Pac-12, who had $530.4 million in revenue. And then the ACC was fourth with $455.4 million in revenue, which actually was our second highest year that we've ever had in the ACC in terms of revenue. The first year, the top year being 2018, what they think it was around $470 million. And then last place was the Big 12 and $439 million. So the first thing that really obviously jumps out to me is it's definitely obvious why maybe Texas and Oklahoma, that was probably a big drawing point of why they wanted to leave. Because at the end of the day, when you look at the Big 12 with names like Baylor, Iowa State, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, TCU, Texas Tech, and West Virginia. I mean, there's no doubt that Texas and Oklahoma are the big names. They're probably drawing a lot of that revenue. Not most of it, but a lot of it. And obviously, the Big 12 has taken a big leap up in football recently, obviously with Iowa State really starting to kind of take shape. But it's just obviously it's very clear that it's still way behind the eight ball. And so when you see that they can immediately jump into SEC and probably take it easily to number one in revenue, it's a big win for Texas Oklahoma, a lot more money in their pocket. And so again, for the ACC though, talking about the ACC here, again, it's obvious that the ACC network is not bringing in as much as the SEC and the SEC network are. And especially now with the SEC adding Texas and Oklahoma, it puts the ACC, again, also way behind the eight ball. And then if it basically puts the ACC in a situation where it has to make a change quickly and it has to do something quickly, or else the Big Ten, the SEC are going to be the two top tier conferences, and the ACC is going to look like a second tier conference, period. At the end of the day, that's the unfortunate reality. And yeah, I mean, there's a lot of pull for basketball, but at the end of the day, unfortunately, college football has a lot of money. It has a lot of money in it, and we can't fall behind when it comes to football. We just can't. And because especially if we want to hold on to schools like Clemson, Miami, some of the bigger names, it's so important that we hold on to those guys, not only for the name themselves, but just for the money they bring to the conference. And because, like, for example, another thing that has really been hurting the ACC, in my opinion, and for a lot of people's opinion, is the dominance of Clemson. There's no doubt that it's frustrating for fans almost to a sort that every single year it's just, okay, who's going to win the conference? Clemson. Period. I mean, that's not necessarily saying it's like they are going to win it, but most people say that, before the season starts, that it's predicted that Clemson's going to win it. And, it's pretty heavily favored. So it's frustrating. And so I still actually remember that Dabo Swinney, he was actually asked about this during a press conference about, how does he feel about about Clemson being so dominant in the ACC, and does it make it a little less enticing? And he fired back saying, well, Alabama dominates in the SEC. And, I actually was reading an article, and I do agree, basically saying that it's a different story because of the fact that even though Alabama, year after year, for the most part, has been pretty dominant in the SEC, there's more teams in the SEC that are getting more national coverage, even for teams like LSU, Auburn, Texas A&M, Georgia, Florida. They're getting a ton of national coverage every single year. And so even though they may not be dominating, they're still getting on ESPN, they're still getting in the headlines, they're still getting the money getting brought in. While, with ACC, we don't have that many schools. I mean, I just named 5 or 6 schools right there that are getting a ton of national exposure that all of you have heard of and probably seen in the news a lot. And unfortunately for ACC, there's not 5 or 6. I wouldn't even say, maybe there's 3 or 4, maybe they're getting a ton, and most of it's Duke and Carolina, and a lot of it's really from the basketball side. So, but one thing I do want to go ahead and say, though, is that there actually have been no actual reports yet that I could find about Clemson being interested or even considering leaving the ACC, which is obviously a huge win for the ACC. But again, the problem is that if the ACC doesn't move quickly, just like I was just saying, and make changes, it's going to force Clemson's hand eventually to leave the ACC, just because at the end of the day, if they can go somewhere else and get a lot more respect, and especially because that's one thing that Dabo Swinney, he always is complaining about, unfortunately, is that, that Clemson could start off number 1 in the country, go undefeated, but then end up number 3 in the country. And I know that you and I, or most fans would say, well, at the end of the day, you made it to the college football playoff. Like, it doesn't really matter if you're number 1, you're number 2, number 3, or number 4, or even now with the 12-team college football playoff, or even if you're number 12. At the end of the day, you have the same shot, no matter what seed you are, to win the national championship. So that's my thing. But again, unfortunately, Clemson is Dabo Swinney right now. I mean, he is the guy at Clemson, the guy. And so unfortunately, if it gets to a point where the ACC is getting squashed and it's starting to affect Clemson and the view of Clemson, then Dabo's going to want to, things to change, and he's going to push hard, and Clemson might follow, his word. He just might, you never know. And the last thing the ACC needs is to lose that. Unfortunately, as much as we don't like Clemson, as much as, it bugs us how good Clemson is, the ACC needs them. At the end of the day, if they make it to the college football playoff, in the last few years that they made it to the college football playoff, it's been beneficial for the ACC because the ACC gets more money from them making it that far. So that's just something to keep in mind. Now, the one thing which I will say now, kind of transitioning from the bad towards what is being done. So first of all, the new ACC commissioner, Jim Phillips, has said that he's looking to get rid of divisions altogether and having a format kind of like we did this past year with 2020, where there's no divisions. It's basically just one big conference. You pick 9, 10 teams and you play each other. Then the 2 teams with the best records play each other. Now, there's a couple of things to this. First of all, the positive of that. So the positive that I see is, so first of all, you basically will have 2 teams with the best ACC records, and more than likely, the best 2 teams that the ACC has during that season playing each other in the ACC championship, because I know that a lot of state fans have said for years, and we've actually made a joke about it, and things NC State fans never say, have said it's the Atlantic and the Coastal in football has been very unbalanced, and I think that we could argue for I would say the last decade, especially in the 2010s, that there's been multiple times where you could say that the Coastal team that went to play in the ACC championship probably was the third or fourth best team in the ACC, arguably, give or take. So basically, meaning that more likely whoever made out of the Atlantic would end up winning the ACC championship, which is frustrating because at the end of the day, it is the championship, which for most people is supposed to be the two best teams, and like that's why the BCS got rid of the BCS format and did like a playoff, so that way you could just get the four best teams there, and then you battle it out and see who wins. And same thing here. We want to have the best two teams play and win it all. So I do like that. But also, too, you can actually see a more possibility of rematches, like, for example, this past year with Notre Dame and Clemson. And, for me, I say the rematches would make it a lot more exciting. And, you may say, well, Leighton, last year, Notre Dame and Clemson played each other again, and Clemson beat them 38-10, just smashed them. And I say, well, obviously, one of the biggest things was that when Clemson played Notre Dame, at Notre Dame, the first time Notre Dame won, they were playing without Trevor Lawrence, as we all know. And then when they played in the championship, they played him again. But what I am saying is that if, let's say, we don't have that happen and the two teams play full strength the first game and then they play again the second time, it's very common. And the idea, hopefully, is that now the teams have gotten to see each other once, even recently. And now the teams are more prepared and will make it more likely a much closer, a much more battle game. And also, too, even like if there's any like rivalries or anything that takes place or any bad blood, whatever it is from the first game, that'll transition to the second game. It should definitely make it a much more intense and much more exciting matchup. So that, again, that is the hope. So and a possibility. And then and then the other thing as well that can really be the benefit is the biggest benefit I see is from a scheduling perspective on a year-to-year basis, because the biggest issue that we have right now when we do have divisions, specifically Atlantic versus Coastal, is basically the setup is the Atlantic teams will play each other, Coastal teams will play each other, and then there's one game where they switch, so we'll play or one or two teams for us, because we play two Coastal teams each year, where we play one of either the Georgia Techs, the Virginia Techs, the Virginias, and then we play Carolina each year. But some teams who don't have that Coastal game just play one Coastal game. So they basically have to wait every 6 or 7 years to play each team. But like when you look at this past year where we didn't have the divisions, we got to play Georgia Tech, we got to play Miami, we got to play Virginia Tech, Virginia, and I mean, it makes it a lot more exciting for fans because, again, it's a not necessarily always the same exact schedule. We don't have to play Clemson, Syracuse, Boston College, and, rinse, repeat. It changes things up. It makes it more exciting because you don't know, basically you go into, when they have divisions, you go into the time where they're announcing the schedule. It's not really a question of necessarily who we're playing, because most of the schedule is already predetermined of who we're playing and where we're playing in terms of whether it's home or away. But then the question is just, when are we playing them? And, that it doesn't really make it as exciting. But now you're adding in the question of not only who are we playing, but where are we playing, whether it's home or away or whatever it is. And so it makes it a lot more exciting, I think, from the fans' perspective. So then really the biggest negative that I really kind of see is that, so first of all, with divisions, it's a round robin style. So basically, you play the teams within your division. So it's a lot easier to compare and contrast teams against one another because they've played against each other. So at the end of the day, whoever has the best ACC record out of those games wins the division. And it's pretty clear of that because this team beat that team and etc. So there's no complaining of that, well, this team got to play this other team that I didn't really get to play. For the most part, you all get to play each other in the same team. So it's much easier. But if you get rid of the divisions, then there might be years where we play Clemson. There might be years that we don't. There might be years that we play Notre Dame. There might be years that we won't. So when you're comparing teams where, like, let's say one has to play Notre Dame and Clemson, But like last year, where we didn't have to play Notre Dame and Clemson, you know, if we both go, let's say, if we both win, if both those teams win all of their games, the team that had to play Notre Dame and Clemson and the team that didn't have to play Notre Dame and Clemson, who really has the better edge? I would definitely say the team that has beaten Clemson and Notre Dame because they had a much tougher schedule. So, but yet the team who didn't get played Notre Dame and Clemson might make it in, and the team who maybe just lost one game to Clemson but beat Notre Dame and everybody else wouldn't get in. So that's kind of the one issue which you might see. But again, with everything, there's positives and negatives. So we'll just leave it like that. But again, the biggest goal that should come from all this and is going to come from all this is, what is it going to take to get the most ACC teams that it can into the college football playoff with this new 12-team format? Because the more teams we have in, the more money the ACC makes. It's plain and simple. That's all that counts. And so whichever helps with that, whether it is having divisions or not having divisions, that's the one we have to do. And that's something for Jim Phillips and the ACC to decide. Now, the one thing which I will say is, when Jim Phillips was hired, the commissioner created a subcommittee to basically evaluate football in the ACC, consisting of coaches, athletic directors, etc. And the two biggest consensus decisions that were made was that the ACC, first of all, needs to do a better job of marketing, but also, two, needs to have a football-first culture. So speaking of each one of those individually. So first of all, when it comes to marketing, that's an easy fix. At the end of the day, it just is a mindset. It's a culture. It's hiring more experienced media people, not only just for each ACC team, but for the ACC altogether and the ACC network altogether. And the biggest thing I've been reading that has been made very evident in terms of that change was during ACC Media Day. Because one thing was that so it was obvious that not only were there more ACC network signs throughout the building, so that when cameras were rolling all around, you saw more of the branding of the logo and the ACC and uniforms and ACC names. It was everywhere. But also, too, there was even more extra setups for the ACC network. Like, when you were watching Media Day, you would see sometimes where the ACC network crew would be sitting in the chairs interviewing the guys, and then they'd be sitting at a high table interviewing the guys, and et cetera. And basically what it is again, it gives more opportunities for viewers to see the ACC network name and the ACC name. And also, too, the other thing is that there was a lot more push of getting out content. So once content was made, once an interview was done, once a segment was made, it was posted as quickly as possible throughout all social media to get it out there. So definitely have seen that so far, and definitely will expect to keep that rolling. But then when it comes to the football first culture, the biggest thing for me that is evident that I think all of us are saying, and why that would be tough, is because the ACC's history is so grounded in its basketball history. Obviously, with NC State, with Wake Forest, with Duke, with Carolina, and their rivalries and the names they've brought through and the games they have played, but also too with even names like Syracuse, who obviously, having historic name like Jim Boeheim and you look all throughout the ACC. They're in like Virginia, they're growing in their basketball tradition, and so you look at that and you immediately think of 6, 7, 8 teams that has a lot of history when it comes to basketball in the ACC. That'd be a tough statement to say. Now, do I think that it needs to be more football focused? Sure. Now, how do you get more football focused? You need to make football more competitive from a national exposure standpoint than basketball. So that's the thing at the end of the day I say is, at the end of the day, the football first culture, I don't think is really a, okay, let's start doing it now kind of thing. It's a, well, if you want to do that, you need to grow the national exposure, period. You need to get more people watching. You need to get more people interested. And just as much as they are interested in watching Duke and Carolina basketball play, watching Carolina State basketball play, watching Virginia and Duke basketball play, etc., you need to have it as exciting when you watch that many matchups in basketball as you do in football. Plain and simple, easy as that. So now, really kind of diving into the prediction side. So for me, the first thing I do want to say is obviously I've already kind of mentioned the name, but UCF. That's one name that's been thrown around a lot as a potential name to come in. So first of all, I brought up the point about how it's a program that is growing in terms of uh, greatness year after year in the college football environment. But the biggest thing which I do have to say against it is, first of all, besides that one year where they named themselves college football champions. They weren't undefeated, beat Auburn. They've done well since, but again, the problem is that when you see who they're playing, you wonder if they're really as dominant as it may seem, especially once they play an ACC schedule that is definitely tougher than the division they're in right now. So that's definitely one concern. But also too, you have to keep big names on. Again, you have to keep big names happy in the ACC that are already here. I said at the beginning, you have to bring in big names. We also have to keep big names. So in Florida, we have two big names, FSU and Miami. And the last thing we need is to lose one of those big names. Obviously, FSU hasn't been very dominant in football recently, but we all know at the end of the day that if you see a sold out Florida State with the tomahawk chop and then Chief Osceola and riding Renegade and playing the spear and all that, and just seeing the history of Florida State, people are going to watch it. And the same thing with Miami with the U. I mean, there's no doubt that those two names will bring national exposure, and you have to keep those around. And if you bring in UCF, that might piss off FSU and Miami. Maybe not immediately, but maybe eventually. I mean, look at Texas A&M, for example. Now, I know that obviously it's different because they weren't even asked. Basically, the SEC just talked to Texas Oklahoma without Texas A&M knowing. But one of the reasons why Texas A&M has a big issue with Texas coming is because that makes them lose a lot of leverage when it comes to recruiting. Because now, not only are they competing, because they're both in the same conference, but now they're both in the same state. And, because one of the biggest things that Texas A&M had over Texas was that they were in the SEC, which they felt was a much more valuable pitch, which now they would lose. So, again, not necessarily saying by any means that if UCF is added, that FSU or Miami or both leave. But I'm just saying that eventually that could be something that kind of sparks the plug a little bit. So just something to keep in mind. And that's one reason I don't think UCF will be one of the guys. Now, one interesting team, which actually was brought up, was Ohio State. And I'm sure everybody in the camera right now or even listening is probably going, Ohio State? What? Yeah, no, seriously. There has been a report or two that actually has talked about Ohio State, how it actually might be an interesting option for them to join the ACC for a couple reasons. So first of all, it's been very clear and very publicized that Ohio State has not been very happy with how the Big Ten leadership has been behaving or deciding or making decisions recently. One example in particular is basically how they decided to handle the COVID situation. Obviously, there was they were shut down for a while and they were basically scrambling and had no plan on how to handle coming back with football. And we're talking about playing in the spring, and obviously Ohio State and a lot of others were very not happy. So luckily enough, Ohio State and the Big Ten decided to play, but still, I know Ohio State was not happy with that they even did that in the first place. But again, so at the end of the day, right now, it is really about competing against the SEC, because obviously for the SEC, they were already making about $721 million in revenue for 2019. And then adding a school like Texas Oklahoma, who obviously for the Big 12 was making most of the revenue that they were making, they're going to take a drastic leap in terms of the revenue they were making. And so if you see a school like Ohio State leaving and coming to ACC, it would obviously draw up a lot more excitement because you would see a whole lot of new matchups. Like, you saw Ohio State and Clemson play each other a couple times last couple of years. And obviously those games were some of the most highly viewed college football games over the past couple of years. And to see those matchups, see Ohio State play, possibly a Notre Dame, to see Ohio State play a school like Miami, I mean, it just draws up names from the past. It's going to be a lot more enticing to fans. And also, too, on top of that, it would also be a huge bargaining tool for the ACC to get out of their agreement with the ACC network and go to the ESPN to agree with a new contract and making more money. And now, obviously, the one thing which I will 100% say this is a long shot. I don't think that the Ohio State would come. I don't think that it's an even option for ACC. But I did want to bring it up because it was very interesting that they even brought up that name of Ohio State. So yeah, I mean, again, before people shoot me down or turn off, right now going, oh, this guy's crazy. Again, I don't think that, but I had to bring that up because I thought that was super, super interesting, to say the least. So now when it comes down to the two teams that I project the ACC will go after and possibly get into the ACC. So the first one that I've already mentioned on Friday, and again, today I'm recording on Friday, was West Virginia. I think that it's a great marriage of between a team and a conference, mostly for a lot of reasons, for a couple of reasons. So first of all, I know at the beginning I said you need big names. And it's obvious that West Virginia is not a big name. But what it doesn't have in terms of a big name, it has everything else. So first of all, it has a huge, passionate fan base for football. I mean, I think I've been to Morgantown for a football game. A lot of people who have seen Morgantown, seen a West Virginia football game. I don't think anybody could really argue that West Virginia has one of the most dedicated and crazy football fan bases in the country. And again, because it comes down to having a more football mindset. And so if you bring in a team and a school like West Virginia, you're going to get a lot more of that football focus. And just even from that fan base just by itself. And then one of the other things as well is that it has a deep history with teams in the ACC, like Pitt, with State, et cetera. There's a lot of teams in the ACC that West Virginia has seen before, that they've played before, like even like at Clemson. They've played them a couple times in bowl games. And so there's already that connection. The biggest thing for me that I would be most excited about is Pitt against West Virginia coming back and being an annual game. Because obviously right now in the ACC, there are two main rivalry games that happen each year. There's State and Carolina, and then there's Miami versus Florida State. But again, you're adding that third one in. And again, this is one that fans are going to watch. And if they aren't watching, it's because they don't know the history, it's very obvious how much Pitt and West Virginia do not like each other. Do not like each other. If you don't believe me, watch a couple games, listen to their fans singing Sweet Caroline, which is hilarious, to say the least. It's no doubt that it would bring fans to watching that game. It would bring fans to tuning in for that game, no doubt about it. And then the other thing as well that it would add is it would add not only a great, a solid football team that could compete in the ACC, but also to bring in a basketball program that, as we all know, can compete in the ACC and not necessarily win it all, but they can compete to win it all for sure. I think they could easily jump in right now into the ACC and be at least a mid-tier team each year easily. And then my other prediction in terms of other teams, so I already said West Virginia, but the other team that I predict is Notre Dame. They have to add Notre Dame. It makes too much sense. It meets everything that the ACC is looking for and the ACC needs right now. Again, Notre Dame is a big name. There's no doubt about it. They're arguably the biggest name in college football, period. So bringing that in, you immediately put yourself back in the possibility of competing with the SEC in terms of revenue. And actually, even Jim Phillips made it even perfectly clear just earlier this week at ACC Media Day that he wants Notre Dame to be in the ACC, saying, and I quote, "They had a chance to play a fantastic and entertaining schedule, play for a conference title, and play for a national championship." So, again, I mean, for Notre Dame, the thing that the ACC can provide for them is provide a lot of more entertainment for the Notre Dame fans. Because one of the things which I've even said for a long time that I haven't stood in terms of why Notre Dame would have fans besides just the name itself and the history of Notre Dame is because then all they're playing for each year is for a national championship. That's it. They're not playing for a conference title. There is no other championship. They're playing for a bowl game, yes, but I mean, it's a bowl game, and so, but again, to add in not only playing that conference schedule and adding more competitive games in that they're playing ACC teams, it leaves a lot more possibilities to not only from the entertainment side, but also too from the tradition side as well, that maybe Notre Dame can start developing more rivalries or more traditions with some of these teams that they're playing that will make it more entertaining each year that they keep on playing in the ACC, if that makes sense. But again, the biggest problem that we have in terms of Notre Dame coming to ACC is their contract they have with NBC that we all are all aware of. And the NBC contract first started back in 2016, and it's going to run through 2025. So, and Notre Dame is paid $15 million per year as a part of this contract. Now, the other thing that I've noticed in terms of how they make money, and one thing that's kind of a benefit for them to stay independent, is that the college football playoff actually awards money to the independent programs, regardless if they made the college football playoff or not. So over the years from 2014 to 2018, Notre Dame made a total combined sum of $28 million. So about $5.6 million per year each year. So now you may say, well, I mean, that's $15 million plus $5.6 million, about $20 million. And I mean, I can say from the 400 and some odd million dollars that the AC made 2019, if you split that up, that's more money than $20 million per year. Well, in 2018, Forbes actually put Notre Dame as the seventh most valuable college football team with $112 million in revenue just in 2018 and $72 million in profit. And you may say, well, again, that's $92 million difference. Where's that coming from? And it's not actually stated anywhere in the research I could find. But a lot of it, you could guess, mostly is probably come from mostly merchandise, as we all could probably guess, but also too, there's a benefit there that they don't have to split any of their money that they do gain from bowl games, from any contracts that they have with any other team, because obviously that's one thing that Clemson, all the ACC and conference schools have to do is at the end of the day, they bring in a lot of money for themselves, but most of the money they have to split throughout the conference. So that is the biggest guess. So anyway, so at the end of the day, that is my two guesses, West Virginia and Notre Dame as being the two teams that will come to the ACC. I think that those teams add a lot in terms of helping with national exposure, helping with that football mindset that the subcommittee was looking for. And again, I hope that was a lot of information and interesting for you guys. So again, please make sure, again, if you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. Really do appreciate that support. Please follow us at Tuffy Talk Now. We will keep you updated as we see news rolling in, mostly from NC State side. But if we see stuff like this, which is just crazy and hard to believe, we'll definitely make sure to post about that as well. And please like this video if you enjoyed it and check out all of our NC State content. So with that being said, thank you all so much. And as always, go Pack, y'all.